because she asked me about the amount the person was willing to pay for human head.
Picture this. You wake up one morning and there is a strange smell in your street. Not garbage, not a blocked drain, something different, something heavier. You ignore it the first day, maybe the second day too, but by the third day, the smell is getting stronger. By the end of the week, it is so bad that people are covering their noses just to walk past a particular building. Nobody knows where it is coming from, and nobody has any idea that behind one locked door on that street, something horrifying is sitting in a plastic bucket. This is the true story of what happened at number 72 MKO Abiola Way, Leme, Abeokuta, Ogun State in January 2022. It is a story about greed, betrayal, and what people are willing to do to another human being just to make money. By the time this story is over, you will understand why the people of Leme have never forgotten what was found in that room. Let us go back to the beginning. January 2022. The Leme area of Abeokuta is a regular working-class neighborhood. People go about their daily lives, buying, selling, going to work, visiting neighbors. Nothing special, nothing unusual. That is, until residents started noticing a smell they could not explain. At first, people thought it was nothing serious. Maybe a blocked gutter somewhere, maybe a dead rat behind someone's wall. These things happen in any neighborhood. People assumed the smell would go away on its own. But it did not. Instead, day by day, the smell grew stronger. It became the kind of smell that hits you before you even enter the street, the kind that stays in your clothes after you walk past, the kind that makes your stomach turn. People started talking. Neighbors gathered and began discussing what could possibly be causing such a terrible smell. Was it the drainage system, a ruptured sewage pipe? Nobody knew, but everyone agreed that something had to be done. The smell was becoming unbearable, and it was affecting the whole area, not just one house. The community youth leader took action. He organized a full sanitation exercise. The young men of the area came together, cleaned the drains, cleared bushes, and checked every open space they could find. It was a proper community effort. Everyone thought that once the cleaning was done, the smell would disappear. But something shocking happened after the sanitation exercise. The smell did not go away. In fact, it got worse. It became even more concentrated, more powerful, and more impossible to ignore. This was the moment when people stopped thinking about blocked drains and started thinking about something far more serious. The community leaders held a meeting. They decided to go further. They asked the youth to inspect the septic tanks in the area, one by one. There was a possibility that one of the toilet pits had cracked or overflowed underground. That would explain the terrible smell spreading across the neighborhood. The young men began moving from house to house, checking every tank they could access. And then, something important happened. As the search team moved from building to building, they noticed something. The smell was not the same everywhere. In some places, it was mild. In others, it was strong. But when they got close to one particular apartment in the compound, the smell hit them so hard that some of them had to step back. This was the source. This single apartment was where the smell was coming from. The apartment belonged to a man named Kehinde Oladimeji, 43 years old, and his wife, Adejumoke Raji, 35 years old. They had been living there together for some time. Their neighbors knew them. Nothing about them seemed particularly suspicious before now. But as the community members stood outside their door, there was no doubt in anyone's mind. Whatever was producing that terrible smell was inside that room. There was just one problem. Kehinde and Adejumoke were not home. They had traveled to Ibadan about 2 weeks earlier for what was supposed to be a short business trip. Days turned into a week. The week turned into 2. And while they were away, whatever was inside their locked room was slowly making its presence known to the entire neighborhood. The community leaders contacted Kehinde. His landlord called him, telling him there was a land document that needed his signature as a witness. A simple story to get him back home without alarming him. Kehinde did not suspect anything. He packed his things and made his way back to Abeokuta. When Kehinde arrived at number 72 MKO Abiola Way, the welcome he received was nothing like he expected. The community youth, the elders, and some concerned neighbors were all waiting for him. They told him directly they needed to inspect his room just like they had inspected every other apartment in the building. They wanted to find the source of the smell. Kehinde refused. He stood there and told them there was nothing in his room. He said they had no right to enter. He became agitated and started arguing with the neighbors. The more they pushed, the more defensive he became. For a man who claimed he had nothing to hide, he was working very hard to stop people from going inside. The community youth immediately contacted the police. Officers from the Kempta division responded quickly. The DPO, CSP Adekule, led his detectives to the scene personally. When the police arrived and told Kehinde he had to open the door, he had no more options. Slowly, with the eyes of the entire community watching him, Kehinde Oladimeji unlocked the door. What was inside that room would shock everyone present. What they found would change the Leme community forever.
The door opened. The smell that had been slowly spreading across the street for weeks rushed out all at once. People standing nearby stepped back. The police officers moved in carefully. And there, inside the room of Kehinde Oladimeji and Adejumoke Raji, they found it. A plastic bowl sitting on the floor, and inside that plastic bowl were fresh human body parts, hands, breasts, and other pieces of a human being already in the early stages of decay. Let that sink in for a moment. This was not something people in that community had ever imagined finding in a neighbor's room. This was someone's body, someone's hands, someone who had been alive, who had dreams, who had a family, and who had ended up inside a bucket in a one-room apartment in Leme, Abeokuta. Kehinde and Adejumoke were arrested on the spot. Police officers from the Ogun State Command took them into custody immediately. The couple was separated and taken to the Kempta Divisional Headquarters for questioning. The Commissioner of Police, CP Lare Bankole, was briefed. He immediately ordered the transfer of both suspects to the Homicide Section of the State Criminal Investigation and Intelligence Department. This was now a full murder investigation. Now here is where the story gets even more disturbing. Because when Kehinde and Adejumoke were interrogated separately, they did not tell the same story. Not even close. Kehinde spoke first. He said that the human remains in the bucket belonged to a 22-year-old young woman named Ephe. According to Kehinde, Ephe was a close friend of his wife Adejumoke. She was a regular visitor to their home. The two women knew each other well. Ephe trusted them. She felt comfortable coming to their apartment, eating their food, and spending time with them. According to Kehinde's confession, Ephe visited their apartment on January 10, 2022. Nothing unusual happened that day, and she left without any problem. But she came back 2 days later, on January 12th. That second visit was the last day of Ephe's life. Kehinde told police that on January 12th, his wife Adejumoke prepared a meal for Ephe, noodles and eggs. A simple, ordinary meal, the kind of thing you make for a friend. But according to Kehinde, Adejumoke had secretly mixed a sedative drug into the food. The goal was simple and terrifying, to make Ephe weak and unable to leave or defend herself. The food worked exactly as planned. After eating, Ephe began to feel dizzy and physically drained. She told them she was not feeling well enough to go home. They offered to let her stay the night. She agreed, thinking she was safe with people she trusted. She was not safe. According to Kehinde, it was while Ephe was lying there, weak and helpless from the drugged food, that Adejumoke acted. She strangled Ephe to death. After Ephe was gone, Kehinde said his wife dismembered the body, cutting it into parts and keeping those parts inside the plastic bucket that would later be discovered by the community. Then came the part about the money. Kehinde said a head and other body parts were sold for 70,000 naira to a buyer in Ibadan. This, he explained, was why the couple had traveled to Ibadan in the first place and why their short trip had turned into 2 weeks away from home. He also explained how the buyer was found. He said a former classmate had contacted him sometime before the incident, asking if he knew anyone who could provide fresh human parts. The classmate said he had a ready buyer who would pay immediately. According to Kehinde, he dismissed the idea completely when he heard it. He said he told his wife about it, never imagining she would take it seriously. But Adejumoke had taken it very seriously. Wait, before we continue, here is something we need from you right now. Write the name Ephe in the comment section. Just her name. Let us honor a young woman who came to visit people she trusted and never came home. If you are watching this and you feel something in your chest right now, that is exactly why Trem Crime Zone exists. We tell these stories so that the victims are not forgotten. And if you are not yet subscribed to Trem Crime Zone, this is the moment. Hit that subscribe button right now. Every week, we bring you real stories like this one. True events that happened to real people in Nigeria. Stories that will shock you, educate you, and remind you to be careful about who you trust. We are building a community of people who care about justice. You belong here. Subscribe now and turn on your notification bell so you never miss a story. Back to the investigation. So, Kehinde had given his full confession. He named his wife as the one who planned the act, prepared the drug, carried out the strangling, and did the dismembering. He painted himself as a man who knew nothing until it was too late and who only found out what his wife had done when the deed was already done. But Adejumoke had a completely different story. When investigators questioned Adejumoke separately, she denied everything her husband had said. She told police she had no idea who Ephe was and that she had nothing to do with what was found in the bucket. She said the human remains were not from any crime she committed. According to Adejumoke, the parts in the bucket were given to her by a friend of her husband, a man who worked as a butcher at an abattoir. She claimed she did not know exactly what was in it. She said he was supposed to come and collect it that same evening, but their unexpected and extended trip to Ibadan made it impossible for him to pick it up before it was discovered. The police asked her a simple question. Give us the name of this man. Give us his address. Give us a way to find him. She could not. She gave no verifiable name, no address, no phone number, no way for investigators to confirm that this mystery butcher even existed. Every question she was asked, she had an answer, but none of her answers could be checked. None of them led anywhere. Two people, two completely different stories, one bucket, one victim, and somewhere in between those two contradicting accounts, a 22-year-old woman named Ephe had lost her life. Here is something every good investigator understands. When two people are caught together and each one immediately points the finger at the other, the truth is almost always somewhere in between. But in this case, the evidence was not pointing in two directions. The evidence was pointing in one very clear direction. Let us go through this carefully. First, there was the food. Kehinde claimed his wife had deliberately drugged Ephe's meal to make her helpless. If this is true, it means someone in that house had planned this in advance. You do not accidentally put sedatives in noodles. You go out and get the drug, you bring it home, you mix it into someone else's food on purpose. That is not something that happens by mistake or on impulse. It takes planning and it takes a decision. Second, there was the victim herself. Ephe was not a random person. She was a friend of the household. She knew these people. She trusted them enough to eat their food and spend the night at their home. This means whoever targeted her knew her routine. They knew she visited regularly. They knew she would come back, and they waited. Third, there was the trip to Ibadan. Kehinde and Adejumoke had traveled to Ibadan right after the incident. They were away for 2 weeks. This is not the behavior of two innocent people who received a mysterious package from a butcher friend. This looks much more like two people who needed to complete a transaction, handing over the parts in exchange for payment, and then waiting for things to cool down before returning. The 70,000 naira payment is also significant. That amount was specifically for a human head that was reportedly sold in Ibadan. This detail came from Kehinde's own confession. He gave this information freely. Now, here is the question investigators were asking. If Kehinde truly had nothing to do with what his wife did, how did he know the exact amount that was paid? How did he know where the sale took place? If you are truly innocent of something and your wife did all of this without your knowledge, how do you know the price that was charged? The investigators were not finished. A week before the couple was arrested, a dismembered body had been discovered in a swamp in the Leme area of Abeokuta. At the time of the arrest, police could not confirm whether the remains in the bucket and the body in the swamp came from the same victim. That investigation continued. What made things even more complicated was the community dimension of this story. The people of Leme had been living next to this couple for months. They had exchanged greetings with Kehinde. They had seen Adejumoke going about her daily life. They had no idea. No one had any reason to suspect that behind the walls of that one-room apartment, something this dark was happening. This is what makes cases like this one so difficult. The people who do these things do not look different from everyone else. They wake up in the morning, they lock their door, they walk down the same streets as you, they say good morning to the same neighbors, and inside that room, they have done something that most people cannot even imagine.
Here is your task. In the comment section, write down this sentence. Justice for Ephe. That is all. 3 words. Because sometimes the only thing we can do for someone we never met is to say their name and demand that the people who wronged them are held responsible. Also, if this kind of story matters to you, please share this video right now. Send it to one person, just one, because the more people know about what is happening in our communities, the harder it becomes for things like this to be ignored or swept under the rug. Trem Crime Zone is here to make sure these stories are told. Share the video, and if you have not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Back to the investigation. The Ogun State Police Commissioner, CP Lanre Bankole, made a public statement. He said that anyone directly or indirectly connected to this crime would be brought to justice. The suspects were moved from the Kemta Division to the Homicide Section of the State Criminal Investigation and Intelligence Department. This meant the case was now being handled by the most experienced investigators available. They were not going to let this go. The state's Police Public Relations Officer, DSP Abimbola Oyemi, confirmed all details of the arrest to the public. He confirmed the names of the suspects, he confirmed the address, he confirmed what was found. The community now knew everything. And the people of Leme, who had been living with that terrible smell for weeks without knowing what it was, now had to come to terms with what had been sitting in a bucket just meters away from their homes. The Baale of Leme community, Chief Moshood Ugunwulu, had been the one who escalated the complaint to the police. He had listened to Pastor Adisa Olarewaju, the co-tenant who first noticed the smell coming specifically from the couple's room, and he had done the right thing. Without that report, without that community response, Kehinde and Adejumoke might have returned from Ibadan, cleaned up whatever was left, and continued their lives as if nothing had happened. The community had become the first line of justice for Ephe.
Let us talk about what this case really is. Not just the crime, not just the arrest, but the full weight of what happened in that small apartment in Leme, Abeokuta, in January 2022. A 22-year-old woman named Ephe went to visit people she considered friends. She sat in their house. She ate food that was given to her. She trusted the people around her, and because of that trust, she lost her life. She did not walk into that apartment as a stranger walking into danger. She walked in as someone who felt comfortable, someone who had been there before and had nothing to fear. And that is what makes this story so painful. She was not careless, she was not reckless. She was simply trusting, and her trust was used against her. Now let us talk about Kehinde Oladimeji and Adejumoke Raji, 2 adults who made a choice. The full picture of exactly who planned what and who did what was still being investigated at the time of their arrest. But one thing was very clear. This was not an accident. Drugging someone's food is not an accident. Keeping human remains in a bucket in your room is not an accident. Traveling to another state to sell those remains is not an accident. Every single step of what happened in that apartment was a deliberate decision. And for what? 70,000 naira. That was the price they put on a human life. A young woman who had her whole future ahead of her was ended for 70,000 naira. That is the number that sits at the center of this entire story. Not a large amount of money, not a business deal, not a desperate, once-in-a-lifetime choice made under unbearable pressure. 70,000 naira. This is the reality of money ritual crime in Nigeria.
People convince themselves that this is a path to wealth, that if they can just complete one transaction, their lives will change. But the people who end up in these situations, who drug their friends, who keep body parts in plastic buckets, who negotiate prices for human flesh, they do not become wealthy. They become suspects, they become prisoners, and they become the people whose names are told in true crime videos for the rest of time. Kehinde and Adejumoke were charged. The Ogun State Police Command made it clear that everyone connected to the crime would be prosecuted. The case was transferred to the highest investigative level available in the state. The Commissioner of Police personally vowed that justice would be served. Whether that justice came swiftly or slowly, it was coming. But what about Ephe? What about the 22-year-old who came to that house as a guest and never left? At the time of the arrest, her full identity had not been publicly confirmed. Her family's grief was real, even if their story had not yet been fully told in public. Somewhere in Nigeria, a family lost a daughter, a sister, a friend, and they deserved answers. They deserved justice, and they deserved for the world to know that she existed and that her life mattered.
This case also raises a question about community. Think about what actually stopped this crime from going completely undetected. It was not a sophisticated police operation at the start. It was a neighbor. Pastor Adisa Olarwaju noticed a smell and told the Baali, Chief Moshood Ogunwolu. The Baali listened and acted. The community youth came together to investigate. When Kehinde refused to cooperate, someone called the police. Every step of this process was driven by ordinary people doing the right thing. That is worth remembering. In your estate, in your street, in your compound, if something does not feel right, say something. Not everything unusual is a crime, but some things that are unusual are very serious indeed. The people of Leme could have walked past that building every day and assumed someone else would deal with the smell. Instead, they worked together. And because of that, a case that might have gone cold was cracked before the suspects even realized the investigation had started. Now, let us talk about something deeper. Why do people in Nigeria continue to pursue what is commonly called money rituals? There is no shortage of information about what happens to people who pursue this path. The stories end the same way every time: arrest, disgrace, imprisonment, and in many cases, the death penalty. The promise of wealth through harming others has destroyed more lives than it has ever enriched. The people who claim to sell this promise are liars. There is no shortcut built on another person's suffering that leads anywhere good. What Kehinde and Adejumoke had in that apartment was not wealth. It was evidence of a crime. The 70,000 naira they collected was not the beginning of prosperity, it was the price of their freedom. Every moment after that transaction was borrowed time. For every young person watching this video who is frustrated about money, who is looking at their life and wondering why things are not moving, please hear this. The people in this story were not poor people with no options. They were adults who made a choice, a terrible, irreversible choice. And now they will spend years, possibly the rest of their lives, paying for it. No amount of money from any ritual will ever be worth what they gave up. Not their freedom, not their dignity, not the 22 years of their lives that were already behind them, and certainly not the life of a young woman named Ephe, who did nothing to deserve what was done to her. Here is the lesson we take from the story of Kehinde Olarwaju, Adejumoke Raji, and the 22-year-old woman known as Ephe. Number 1. Be careful about who you eat with. This sounds simple, but it is serious. Ephe had visited that apartment before without any problem. She had built a level of comfort and trust with the people inside, and that comfort was what made her vulnerable on January 12, 2022. Trust is important in relationships, but it must always be paired with awareness. Pay attention to how people treat you when money is tight, when they seem desperate, or when their behavior suddenly changes. Your instinct exists for a reason. Number 2, your community is your first line of defense. The police did not discover this crime on their own. A neighbor noticed something. A community leader acted. Young people organized. That chain of action is what brought justice to Ephe's case. Know your neighbors. Be involved in your community. When something does not feel right, speak up. You might be the person who saves someone's life without ever knowing it. Number 3. There is no such thing as a shortcut through someone else's pain. The belief that harming another person can bring you prosperity is not just morally wrong, it is practically false. The evidence is everywhere. In case after case, across Nigeria and beyond, the people who pursue this path end up destroyed. There is no version of this story where the people with the bucket end up living the life they wanted. It does not exist. Number 4. Justice moves even when it moves slowly. Kehinde and Adejumoke thought they had left Abeokuta and given themselves enough distance from what happened. They thought that by the time they came back, everything would be okay. But the smell did not wait. The community did not wait. The police did not wait. And Ephe's story did not disappear. Justice was set in motion before they even came home. If you're doing something wrong, understand this. Time does not always work in your favor. This has been a Trem Crime Zone story. We told you this story because Ephe deserves to be remembered. We told you this story because the people of Leme, Abeokuta deserve to be acknowledged for how they handled an unimaginable situation with courage and community spirit. And we told you this story because somewhere out there, someone watching this video might be facing a moment of desperate decision. We hope this story is the reason they choose differently. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it made you angry on behalf of Ephe, please write your thoughts in the comment section. Tell us what you think about this case. Who do you believe, Kehinde's confession or Adejumoke's denial? And do you think 70,000 naira was really the full story, or was there more behind this crime? Let us have that conversation below. If you are not yet subscribed to Trem Crime Zone, please do it right now. We bring you true stories from Nigeria, stories that are real, stories that matter, and stories that need to be told. Every subscribe helps us keep doing this work. Turn on your notification bell so you never miss a new story. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. We'll see you in the next story. Stay safe, stay aware, and never stop asking questions.